If you're building a business nowadays, it has to be a technology business, even if it isn't. AI is coming together, and we either join forces with it or we're going to lose it. But you can't afford a full-time CTO. Just bring us 1 day a week or something. That would, for a lot less money, will give you all the impact.
Hello everyone, my name is Marcin Kokot and welcome to Product Odyssey, the podcast series where we explore how to build digital products fundamentally better. Today, we're joined by Alfonso Ferrandez, a technical leader who's transformed healthcare through AI, engineered F1 racing solutions, and builds rocket systems for space companies. With a PhD in computational biofluids dynamics, yes, that's a real thing, he's a guy CTOs call when they need a CTO. He's helped numerous startups scale from early stage to major success, moving between industries as diverse as Formula One, healthcare, and satellite launches. When he's not crafting AI systems that doctor actually trusts or helping launch the next European space company, he's teaching at next generation of tech leaders at Imperial College Business School. Today, we'll cover topics of AI in healthcare, responsible AI, patterns and anti-patterns in AI, and war stories from seasoned fractional CTO, CTO toolbox, and due diligence, and more. Whether you're a seasoned product leader or just starting your journey, this episode is for you. So, let's begin. Welcome, Alfonso, on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And
appreciate it.
Let's dive into the topic right away. I was scanning your LinkedIn profile. It's one of the longest that I have seen. It's a great experience. You're supporting so many companies that it's hard to decide where to start first. But one theme is actually appearing all the time, and that's healthcare. And I wanted to start with that story first. So can you actually explain why you've dived into the healthcare in the first place?
It goes back a long time, and it's when I came to the UK to do a master's. I'm not even going to tell you the year. Many years ago, it was. I ended up doing my sort of degree was aerospace, and I was fascinated by aerodynamics and hydrodynamics, and so I came to the UK to do a master's, and I ended up doing something for computational fluid dynamics of heart valves, and that was sponsored by the NHS at the time. And after I did that, then I did a PhD also in computational fluid dynamics, but this time on the brain blood flow. And so again, sponsored by the NHS. And after I finished this, then I went into industry and I did all sorts of things, nothing to do with healthcare for years. And I was thinking always, I have to give back to the NHS because actually they paid for my my graduate education in the UK. And I thought I need to do something to do with healthcare at some point. My brother's a surgeon, there's healthcare in the family, but I wasn't actually using my skills on it. So eventually the opportunity came. I did a couple of things for friends and things in healthcare, wrote some software for them and things, but I was like, very, very under the radar. But at one point the opportunity came to join as CTO for Dr. Link. Dr. Link was a startup at the time based in London, working on sort of becoming the digital front door for primary healthcare in the UK, right? So it was basically very strongly connected to the NHS, and it will basically try to work out whether a patient needed to see a doctor and what sort of path they should follow to see the doctor, or whether what they had was purely a cold or something and they needed a paracetamol. They didn't need to distract the doctor. They could go to the pharmacy or things like that. And so we basically started building a system to help filter out people who didn't need to go to the doctors, to give them a better journey and to make sure that the doctors were available for the people who really needed them.
Perfect. Right. That sounds exciting. You are playing a role as a CTO right there. And what was your biggest technical challenge you've stumbled on when you have started to work on Dr. Link?
I think the one thing I noticed first is that the scope of the problem was quite big, and the way they were approaching it, the person that was there before me, they were looking at it very much like an app. They were not thinking about the patient and the data that the patient brings with them and the ability of doing much better work to help the patient if you understand the patient and what they bring. When you're building an app rather than a platform, it becomes very difficult to have that sort of insight across the whole population and therefore being able to zoom into the patient. So the biggest challenge I had was to actually change the mentality of thinking app first and say, let's build a platform, manifestation of which will be an app, but that's almost like a side effect. We're building a data platform which allows us to scale, allows us to take in a lot of different patient data and then make decisions based on that data, as well as learn from what we're doing with our current patients for future patients to actually make the journey better, simplify things that our analytics were saying that were no longer necessary. Why are you asking this question? Where actually we see that the outcome that has nothing to do with the answer to that question, that sort of thing. So thinking platform first was the biggest challenge, and to get the team converted to that sort of way of thinking was quite a challenge. And I think so. Sometimes I always say this: technology is not so much a challenge as people are, right? So changing how people think, and that's why digital transformations are very difficult to get right, because you're trying to get people to do things differently, and that's always difficult, either at the industry level or even at a company level. So yeah, I would say that was the biggest challenge.
Can you guide us through how you have actually convinced to go to this? It seems like very right direction to go for the platform, but it's change of the strategy altogether, right? And the focus itself. How you have approached that?
I think it's a little bit, you have to actually identify the benefits of, why am I proposing that we do this rather than what you're currently doing. I mean, at the moment when I joined, they had, I mean, I'm making a number up, say around 1,000 patients in the platform, right? So in the app. It was very difficult to convince people to get this thing and to get them on board and that sort of thing. And so to build a platform that can be architecturally safe, and so you can demonstrate to the NHS, because to be part of the ecosystem, the NHS ecosystem, you have to go through quite a few hurdles. One of them is like architectural security. How have you secured the data where the patients are going to be? How are you going to connect to our backbone? Am I going to allow you to connect to our backbone? Show me how you prepare your platform to do this. And so I had to talk to the senior team in the company to actually explain the benefits that our platform would bring, what we could do with the data that they hadn't thought of. They were thinking just about that experience between the doctor and the patient. They weren't thinking about much bigger scale, which would allow us to then do much bigger things, much more helpful for the NHS, to the point that we could advise on policy. We can see the big picture now, the whole population. We can advise on what things should happen, which I can tell you a very interesting story later about COVID. But so it was that discussion about the business benefits as well as to the customers' benefits of what we were building, as opposed to how do we build an app that we can sell, which was very sort of small thinking, insular, one patient at a time sort of thinking. By the time I left Dr. Link, it was acquired. We had about 14 million patients in the books, right? So the difference between 1,000 patients and that's
a huge
platform,
jump.
Yeah, scale.
Yeah. So
exactly. So it was all about convincing the business side of things, and I think that's where a CTO should bring to the party, right? Unfortunately, the letter CTO now mean a lot of things to a lot of people, since someone who's just out of uni and starts a company is a CTO, and someone who's been in the industry for 30 years and ran lots of companies is also a CTO, right? So in my opinion, the seasoned, so I always put the word seasoned in front of CTO. So if you want a seasoned CTO who's done it before, he's been burnt, he's learned, he's failed, he's done again, they should bring that sort of wisdom with them, right? The understanding of what works, what doesn't work, why the business would benefit from this, because it's business first, strategy first, as opposed to, I love tech, I'm going to build cool tech things that may or may not help the business, but who cares? I'm a techie, which tends to be the early career of a techie, right? It's like they're more focused about what they're learning, how exciting it is and things. Whereas when you've done that for many, many years, then you start realizing really you won't have a job unless the business does well. And so what can you do as a techie to help the business thrive? And that's where that focus, when you talk to the board as a techie, but in their terms and in their language, in a way they understand, which is how do we make this company grow and succeed? They tend to listen much better than if you just throw techie words at them and they have no idea what you're talking about.
As a CTO, you would like to be an expert on technology and actually advise on the technology, but it ends up to most of the cases to be actually translation to the language of the business and being able to align people.
Exactly.
That's a great story, and I say like a great success to go from the one aspect is NHS, which is I know it's complicated with any other government institution to work with, but then bringing the platform vision to so much to this level and the implementation, that's remarkable. This is if my research is right, that's 2018 and 2020, I guess, the years that you were at the Dr. Link. That was before the whole hype of the AI and before everybody was mentioning it will be the next wave. But I guess that's and help me here, right? When you've had a vision of the platform that was already connected with not only gathering the data, but also doing the analytics on top of that. Any kind of stories or insights into how you have thought about the future of this platform in context of machine learning or analyzing and actually processing the data?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before COVID, right? So one of the things that I was convinced, and I had colleagues that were, also, it was great to work with some people who joined the company pretty much at the same time as me, who were visionaries, who saw what healthcare could be versus what it was at the time, right? And how averse it was to moving forward at pace with digital supporting the movement. And we were all convinced that population health was where it was at, right? And that's where I was talking about the platform scale, is because if you start looking at insights across a whole population, you can determine amazing things that inform policy. So you can say this region of the country has consistent type of condition or event.
Correct.
Let's investigate why, and let's get more demographic data and understand why. And then you can go to government and say, look, this region of the country seems to have an issue, and we believe it's X, and then that could inform. Yeah, that's how fluorination of water
you start
happened, and that's how,
to see the
sort of
patterns, right? You are able to
exactly
know
large
that.
scale decisions from government.
Yeah.
So we were building that. We were building the analytics and very interesting data pipelines and things to actually start looking at the map. And my vision was to have, in the office, we had these big screens which were showing all sorts of analytics. They had a map and they showed you what things were happening. So every time a patient got the app and said, I have a problem, I want the app would work a bit like a chatbot at the time, before chatbots were a thing. And it will walk you through a bunch of questions, and it will narrow down. So the principle was, you start with, we think you have everything, and then we'll ask you questions and narrow it down like a funnel until you just can have one or two or three things, right? And at that point, the doctor then has a much easier way to find out what's wrong with you, and they may recommend tests and things to narrow it down further. So if you think about the amount of questions and the amount of symptoms that we're gathering in that journey times millions, across the whole country, knowing what region in general, we will get like the first three letters of a postcode, for example, which place you somewhere in the country, but not specifically in the street, for example. You can start getting very interesting insights, right? As to there's an outbreak of flu in this area, or there's, things like that. So you can prepare the hospitals in the local trust to say, the winter's coming. I can see that there's lots more cases of people complaining about respiratory disease, etc. What we very early saw, and this is fascinating because this was towards my end. I left March 19 or something like that. It's 2020. So in late 19, we all know what happened. This weird thing coming from supposedly China, virus started spreading everywhere. They all thought it was going to be a blip and nothing was happening. We saw the first case in London on our map in October 2019. And it very quickly became a cluster, and it very quickly spun. And this is before it was in the news. Nobody knew about it. Our clinical staff in the company knew this was not normal. The way it was expanding was not flu. This was something else. And we had the map with the red dots. It was literally like a movie. It's amazing to see, worrying as well. So we got in touch with NHS England, the PHE, and all these sort of departments and stuff to say there's something going on here. And obviously they already knew, and they were in contact with other countries. Italy started exploding and all that sort of stuff. But we were literally the first ones to detect it and to see the extent of it in London, because that's where the main airports were, and that's where things started spreading. And then we all know what happened in by March, we were lockdowns and all sorts of things, right? So that was a fascinating view of what you can do with data. And I had discussions at very high level governments and things about when we have the next pandemic, we will have these tools already in place. So we will see things happening and we will be able to react quicker. I'm hoping that the governments actually take action when they see this data, rather than assuming it's going to be another little flu or something, which we all know, that didn't work out to be the case, right?
Correct. Did anything happen on the NHS level that after you've left? I know they are not monitoring so much the situation now, right? But this kind of
I mean, obviously now they have all these tools in place, and they have a way to monitor these things, and they react much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But like any government organization, things move slower, and you find that resistance. I'm working in health tech. I've worked in health tech for so many years that where the difficulties are, where the barriers to entry are. the regulatory frameworks. And I think now with AI, we now starting to see some movement. The government is recently announced, there's more policies around AI. And I think they're relaxing some of the regulations for early clinical trials and experimentation with AI around different areas that may actually accelerate success. So there's a way of getting into the system if you prove that you're going to benefit the patient immediately because of something that you've developed, even if it's AI backed. You have like a safe pathway where everybody's aware of the potential caveats, but you can exercise that, and the patient obviously has to approve using that sort of thing. So we're sort of starting to change a little bit the way in which these sort of technologies can get into the system much quicker, to the point that at some point, your conversations with the doctor will be, it's a little bit like we're doing now with development, right? So you get the AI to write some of the code, and then the senior will look at it and make sure that it's not done anything crazy and fix it. I think healthcare will become more and more of that. We'll try and help the patient upfront very quickly, because you don't need to wait for a doctor to be available. And only in certain cases where the AI says, yeah, this definitely could be something serious, then they refer you. So I think that's how we're going to get reducing the pressure that we currently see in pretty much every national health service, which they always have more patients that they can deal with effectively.
Yeah, that's almost a constant that we can assume that this business will never go down, right? And
exactly,
you are talking about I'd like to pin this topic because there is a natural connection with my next question to that, but just parking it, the topic of actually preventing and making decision for doctors and analyzing.
Mm-hmm.
But before doing that, one more thing on the Dr. Link history. Building the division was to build a platform. So your aspiration is to build nationwide data. What kind of limitations you see if you think about this kind of vision in form of technical limitations? I mean, like the selection of the technology, any kind of limitations. Do you remember any kind of thinking of what was your framework for assessing what kind of solution we need to actually go for, and what kind of limitations we'll have?
So as I mentioned before, that there is quite a strict framework to get into to be able to plug into the backbone, that they call it, of the NHS. And so you have to provide proof of the security, the scalability, the integrity of your system and your architecture. And so there are very limited suppliers at scale that are in that framework. And so you have to choose, started with Azure, Microsoft, then AWS came in. I think that Google's also in there. So at the time, our platform was limited to our choice was limited to Azure, because that was the one that had the relationship with the NHS, and they've obviously proven the infrastructure to them, etc. So we were architecting around that. Now we had no ambitions. We had clients already in the US, right? So we wanted to replicate this at the private hospital level, because obviously the US system is very different to the UK system. But we needed this sort of global way of managing the platform whilst retaining the data and the privacy of the patient in the country or in the territory that we're in. So that alone is quite an interesting challenge in health tech. And you will see it, every time you work with health tech across borders. Germany has their own regulations, the EU has their own regulations, and so you have to make sure that you do storage in the country, or at least in the region that they authorize you to. You can have controlling. The brain of the platform can be globally distributed or even centralized in some place, but then they don't have access to the special category data of a patient, or the PII, private personally identifiable information of a patient, from the territory that is not allowed to see that. So someone in the UK should not be able to look up patient records for Donald Trump, for example, right? Because they're in different territories and they're not allowed to do that. So you have to build those measures in place. Like we build really smart double credential systems where the machine can do things, but the human can't. So you can't get a developer logging into the US database and started looking at people's records and stuff like that. So machine first, very secure. I many years ago in a conference, I met the head of security for Spotify. She's a Spanish lady, amazingly smart and insightful, and she told me how they did that sort of thing in Spotify, and that sort of planted the idea in my head of, I can do that in health tech, because it just works very interesting. They call it a padlock system and things, and it just allows you to do that sort of thing where you can have data that the human can't look at. Only the user that has the credentials to access that, which is the actual patient, can see the data, and if you give the keys to a doctor to see them temporarily. But an engineer in my platform couldn't just go in and have a look at it, because it's encrypted with a credential that belongs to the user and stuff. So it's the interesting things you can do. And that obviously appeals to healthcare services, because you're proving that you can't mess with the patient data, and neither can they. You can do aggregate vision. You can aggregate at the population health level. You can do the sort of thing, but at that point, there's no personally identifiable information. You're just looking at regions and dots.
It sounds like, because this is the most, I guess it's, if not one of the most highly regulated area, right? And then you have one, as you have summarized, right? It's easier for you because you are having limited number of options that you can go for due to the securities, due to the regulations. But on the other side, you need to find out solutions for your problems, which there doesn't exist on the scale. So you need to actually, as you have mentioned with the Spotify, it's easy to see and borrow solutions from the others, but you need to search for them. And this solution with actually computer first and then human and going with this kind of level of security, that's remarkable thinking. And actually I've seen it applicable in multiple industries and as a standard right now. I don't know if that was the beginning, but yeah. But
I think that's what I love about what I do, right? So I work with lots of different industries. Health tech happens to be one that people call me for, but I worked in lots of different industries. And one of the things I learned, and I've done lots of talks about this, is I call cross-pollination. If you work in an industry and the people in that industry have always only hired people from that industry, they're missing a lot of vision, right? So I call them have blinkers on. And so if you only ever solve the problems the way you solve them in that industry, guess what? Someone like me comes along from another industry, but we solved that 10 years ago, and this is how you do it. And then, oh my God, you just saved us 5 years of research. If you do that constantly, and lots of people do that now, crossing, I call it historical diversity as opposed to any other type of diversity. They're all important. But historical diversity, having been in many places and bringing that knowledge with you, it's a shortcut to a lot of things, right? So having spoken to someone in Spotify, I could have been working there. I could have been doing something else. I would say, yeah, I know how to solve that problem. And it's never me using healthcare, but it's a technical solution to the same problem.
Right.
So, I love that. I love the fact that we can do that in technology.
I always love this kind of statements that it's not always about the one man to be right, but it's about the group to be right, diverse group to gather and pull the examples and going beyond actually the my industry, searching for alternatives and different industries. That's so much thing to underline. You've actually jumped after Dr. Lang to change the gears and come back to this question, because I'm really interested in the fact that you stayed, or you've moved for a second from the healthcare and then you've moved back and you've jumped to Oxford. Can you at least give us a quick peek into why you have made this decision and what was your role in the Oxford Immune?
I mean, I obviously work for a lot of different industries at any given time, but health tech is where, where my heart is really when complex problems come. Oxford Immune is trying to solve a problem it's huge, right? So the one test that pretty much everywhere in the world gets done the most is, and you see in the movies when they say CBC, Chem7, in the ER and stuff, CBC, or FFC, which is full blood count, FBC, is basically where they look at how many red blood cells, white blood cells, what type of white blood cells you have, because based on the ratios and combinations, it may indicate viral infection and bacterial infection, leukemia, anemia, all sorts of conditions. Those tests are normally done in a big, expensive machine in a lab somewhere, right? So if you go to your family doctor or your GP in the UK, they'll say, right, you need a test to see whether you have A or B. They'll draw some blood. They'll send it to the lab. It'll take 2 weeks. It won't take 2 weeks for them to do it. It'll take 2 weeks between the time they send it, they analyze it, they write a report, they send it back, and that sort of stuff. And guess what? In 2 weeks, they're hoping that what you had was mild and it's gone, so that there's nothing to do, right? So cold or flu. If it's something more serious, those 2 weeks could be very important, right? If it's leukemia or something more, that should be intervened quickly. So what Oxford Immune is realized is that they developed the an artificial intelligence layer that would actually interpret people's blood tests and very quickly come up with almost like your personal immune system, as in everybody at the moment blood tests work in a way that basically said, okay, you should have between this many and this many red blood cells to be normal.
Yeah, standard.
And between this many leukocytes, that actually there's no such thing as an average person. Everybody's different, right? So what to me is normal, to me, to you, maybe you're in trouble, right?
Correct.
Or the other way around. And so what Oxford Immune does is if you take a few blood tests, it actually determines what your normal is, right? And so your range may be inside or outside the normal range, the academic normal range, but it's actually your range. And what they can do is then detect you deviating from your range, as opposed to many times you deviate from your range, but they do a blood test and you're in the normal range of the population, so you're fine, but actually you're not. You're getting worse.
Correct. Yeah.
And until you break the barrier of that general threshold, nobody will do anything, even though they know you're ill. Right?
That's amazing. I've always, at least in Poland, when we are doing that, it's always relying on the fact that you go to the blood work and then you have the results, and the only thing that you can compare to is a standard, and people are reacting to that, and if I'm okay or not.
And there's no such thing.
Exactly. Yes. And that's always there. But this introduces the first thing, right? That you need to have the history to create a baseline, right? So you need to store this data, right? And that's probably a part of it.
And so the difficulty was they needed to get blood tests quickly, and they needed to get them anywhere.
Yeah.
And so they looked for a system that could do that, and there wasn't one. And so the platform was there, but there was no way to get this. I mean, you could get your blood test done privately and then send the data to the platform, but that's not practical, and it takes so many weeks, and it costs lots of money and things. And so basically what the team started developing, and that's where I came in as well, was this AI managed machine, which is a small machine that sits in your home or in a doctor's office or in a clinic, in a walk-in clinic, that sort of stuff. And you can do as many blood tests as you want. Literally drop a blood from your finger, put it in a little thing, stick it in the machine. Within 5 minutes, you had a result. Very accurate result, right? As good as the machines that you pay $500,000 for in a hospital.
Okay.
And so it was almost the need for getting those blood tests that drove the company to become a hardware company to develop that machine that didn't exist. And what happened is that machine needed to use, you have a very miniaturized and sophisticated microscope that needs to count cells. And guess what? That's not very easy, especially at scale, right? And so what we created was a massive computer vision system, super advanced. I'm still blown away by what it does, but effectively the machine will scan tiny, and I'm talking like a millimeter by a millimeter square of blood sample, diluted with a special dye that effectively colors your white cells, because your white blood cells are invisible unless you color them. So you need to mix it with a bit of dye, put a drop in, and then you see the red blood cells are red, the other ones become blue. And then the system will detect that, and it will use some very advanced algorithms that were created within the company to work out, based on how many I've seen in these small samples, I can give you a very accurate estimate. If I blow that sample up to a body, how many blood cells you have per milliliter and stuff like that, right? And then we did lots of tests comparing it with a really expensive machine, same blood sample both, and we were not just as good. In some cases, we were better, because what's the gold standard, which is this very expensive machine, if you do a hand count, ours will be more accurate than theirs.
Whoa, okay.
So, and this is all AI driven, right? So the idea there is that we now have a platform that can do amazing things to determine your normal range. We have a machine that can take that blood draw, and we have a cloud system that will literally process that very quickly. After inserting the cartridge in 5 minutes, it has the answer, it puts it in the platform, and that's how you start collecting data. So that means that in the future, the idea is that your doctor, when you go and see them for a 15-minute slot, you could literally go to reception, prick your finger, put a drop. By the time it's your turn, he already has the blood results in front of them. And so if it could be bacterial or viral, they'll tell you right there, rather than waiting 2 weeks.
Yeah,
right? That's the idea.
Yeah, it sounds.
And obviously, there's a lot of applications for cancer and other things for rapid response to tests.
That sounds, again, it's almost like a COVID level story on this one, because retrospectively it's easy to see that makes sense, but it's not so if you are in the middle of that, right, and you start this. So you wanted to, correct me if I'm wrong, right, you wanted to solve the issue of reducing the entry barrier, right? So for getting the blood test, and you wanted to speed up the lead time between taking the test and then having results. And you spotted an issue, which we don't have any kind of means to do that, the machine itself. And I get that's the you've went for that and you've developed it, but there was a decision before that. Should we go for that, and is it even possible? How you've made that kind of decision, or how you have, as a team or even as a company, made that kind of decision, which was basically putting a stake on this?
You make prototypes, and funnily enough, the first prototypes were a mobile phone with an attached lens and a little sample of blood. And we saw that we could actually get some good images that then an AI could actually understand and process. Now, this was obviously clunky. It was actually a fairly small device, but it was clunky, it was slow. It literally had to move the sample around so that we could take multiple photos and things. But the proof of concept, which is what we do in technology to demonstrate that something is worth pursuing now, worked. And that was, I can take a photo on my desk of blood. I can then use AI to interpret what it's seeing and give me reasonable results. The accuracy wasn't as high at the time, but then we knew we hadn't developed the models very, that much, and the image quality wasn't as good as we could get it. So that's where the decision was made. You know what? If we get microscope quality lenses and a bigger AI processing power, which is the cloud rather than my desktop, we're gonna get somewhere interesting, and that's where it went.
So going with the prototypes makes sense, and getting to the final solution through that kind of means, that's the good pattern that we see always. As soon as you've had that, I assume that it's easy to us to take that kind of thinking that if I have a machine already and I can do all the analysis and I'm using the cloud, so I can make a decision based on that. Is there, what was your thinking behind that kind of vision? Because you have all the information needed. You could go with AI, making all the analysis and making statements, it's this kind of sickness, or you are okay. Where was the limit of that kind of thinking? If this is this path, should we stop it? Should that be a decision?
That's the eternal man in the middle. So regulation won't let you, right? So regulation won't allow a machine to make decisions, at least not yet, right? And so the only person who can make a decision is someone who's qualified to make it, in this case, a doctor. So the idea was, can we make the doctor's life simpler by doing the analysis, feeding it to generative AI with the record of the patient, completely anonymized, but it will say this is a 35-year-old female, not pregnant, with diabetes, and here's the blood test. And then the system would actually then, it's obviously fine-tuned on top of one of the big systems. It would then understand who the person was, what blood test he was looking at, and therefore what potential things it could be. And what it then generates is a set of questions for the doctor to ask to narrow it down. And then it's the doctor's experience which ultimately decides what the treatment will be. And so what we were doing, instead of having to start from scratch, talking to the doctor for 15 minutes, send the test to the lab and all that's done up front, all the doctor has to do is look at the report, sit with the patient and ask the questions. And it might see a question that says, this makes no sense, mark it, and that will teach the system that was the wrong question, don't ask it again, learn from it. So that's where we put the generative part of AI. So before it was all computer vision, now we have the generative AI, which also allows to have that sort of ultimate decision is the human, but we make their lives easier by solving as many of the problems up front as possible.
So that was partially the taking the pattern of human in the loop was partially forced by actual regulations. But
yes,
if there would be no regulations, would you assume that it's already the state of technology is already there, that we are able to do that?
No, I think because we haven't, because this has always been a barrier. There's never been, I think now we're starting to accumulate enough data, but there's never been, one of the biggest problems we have with our data, and I think this is true for all AI, is bias, right? In this case, it's not involuntary bias, but much of the data, much of the textbooks that you read and stuff is based on a white man, effectively, right? And so there's conditions that may not look the same on a different race, on a different gender, that sort of stuff. And so one of the problems we have is that if you just let loose an AI that's been trained solely on a 35-year-old white man, and you get a 55-year-old black woman, for example, they may pick up or not pick up something that's very important, right? And so you still need a human to do that. Now, if we collect enough data, like Dr. Ling was doing, across the population, irrespective of who they are, But then you actually have those metrics, those demographics to say, by the way, this data belongs to a 55-year-old black woman. But I don't know who it is, or I don't care who it is. I just know the demographic details, so I can then teach the AI, by the way, this condition looks different on this type of person than this type of person.
Mm-hmm.
One of the issues we had with a while back, and this one of my colleagues told me about this, meningitis. Typical, you put the glass on the skin of the child, right? And roll it over, and if it doesn't disappear, it's dangerous. Guess what? It doesn't work in black skin.
Right, yeah.
But nobody had told the nurses that, right? So the black children died of meningitis because they said, no, that must be something else because the glass trick didn't work, right? That's the sort of bias I'm talking about, but a much bigger scale, because the data we feed in these systems has to be across the population. Otherwise, we're only going to be able to help one cluster of the population, which is, nobody wants.
Yeah, so it's this vision that ultimately it would be great to have the sample which is worldwide, not just the national, right, or any kind of local one.
Exactly.
Correct, and technology can actually allow us. But just to close the topic of the human in the loop, what would you state is the biggest misconception about people thinking about human in the loop in the form of AI?
I think we're seeing that now with generative AI in particular, but I mean, it applies to everything. Assuming that the human is just there to press a button.
Right.
That's a big misconception, right? Because the machine is a machine and it's trained with the data you fed it, right? So again, if it's biased and you have a junior doctor or a junior nurse or a junior developer accepting what the machine is giving it and just pressing and go, we're in trouble, right? And we're seeing that in tech. We're seeing that, and I say like with generative AI models as they are now, giving that tool to a junior that's just come out of university is like giving a gun to a baby.
Correct.
Right? So you can build something that works, but I bet you won't work at scale. I bet you won't cover all the edge cases, that sort of stuff, because they don't have the experience. They will have it in time when they learn. Same with health tech, right? So you put someone who's not a fully qualified doctor to just accept what the AI gives, just there as almost like a check to say, yeah, just go. We have a problem. So I think the biggest misconception is that it takes untrained people to press the button. You need very qualified people to be in the loop, because that's the only way the system will then get better and learn, no, that's wrong. Let me tell you that's wrong. So next time you don't make that mistake. So some people think that, AI has come to take our jobs. I'm not sure we're there yet. And there's so much scope, so much to learn, both human and AI, to learn about the different areas that we have to address, that we're going to need the human in the loop for a long time, and skill human in the loop. So hopefully people don't stop learning, because that would be a disaster.
That should be a statement that will underline it a couple of times. I would say that.
Yeah.
That's actually touching one of the most common thing that we're talking about when mentioning AI, and that's the hallucinations or AI not getting you the right information, but you never know that. What was your approach here, and how you have actually approached that from technical perspective, the hallucinations and the Oxford Immune?
So in the technical perspective, I mean, we tried to reduce them by using RAG and given a constrained set of data, said like, give me answers from these documents first before you even go to your big brain that has all the stuff. Here's the best practices from NICE, which is like the National Health Organization for NHS, that produces the guidelines of what defines a condition, what treatments are recommended for what, and that sort of stuff, right? So you feed it all those documents, and then he uses his knowledge and the blood test to understand conditions maybe, and then it constrains itself to the regulations to say, according to NICE, because I think you have leukemia, these are the potential recommendations of treatment, right? But that only takes you so far. You can still, RAG doesn't eliminate hallucinations completely, because it'll still draw from its experience before, or try to. And so that's where human in the loop again comes in, and that's why it has to be an expert, because ultimately you're going to make a recommendation to treat a human. You can't assume that hallucinations are going to be around for a while. I think I'm not sure whether it's unsolvable, but it's very difficult problem to solve. And so unless you have someone who know what they're doing to filter that last stage, at least in the cases where it's vital that you get it right? So when the patient life is at risk, you need a human to be there. If it's, is my bread cooked to the level of brown I want it, and the camera gets it wrong, it's not a big deal. But the big issue would be if you actually diagnose or misdiagnose someone.
We're talking about the hallucinations and the approach with RAG. and how you have actually approached that with RAG, but not limited to RAG, right? Technically, this is not yet the time that thinking about agents was already on the table, right? To approach any kind of like correcting the results or having different agents which are actually verifying the solution, right?
So the concept of having someone looking up what you're saying and checking it, like the fact checkers in the political debates, that's how we were thinking agents. I mean, we didn't call them agents, right? We just thought there should be a service or system that's actually constantly looking at what you're saying. And we had an idea of actually, and this is again in Doctorling, we didn't implement it, but this was actually in the planning stages, which was we had an ability in the app, you'll be able to do what we're doing right now, but with the doctor, right? So you could talk with the doctor on video and tell them your problems and, you know, that sort of stuff. So you didn't have to go to the office of the doctor if it's just a quick check. One of the things we thought is to have a listening agent. Effectively, we didn't call him that, but it was like a listening agent that would be looking at how the doctor was communicating with you, how much time he was giving the patient to speak. Did it sound aggressive? You know, sentiment analysis, real time, that sort of stuff. And it would then record and document the what was happening in the conversations to potentially improve the training that they were getting to doctors that were doing this sort of service, right? So you could say you never let the patient speak enough, or you're very aggressive with them, or you're dismissive, or that sort of stuff. So the idea was, which now you can see in these note takers, right, that we have everywhere, like Fireflies and Note and things, which tell you how many words per minute you speak and who speaks the most in the conversation, that sort of stuff. But we were applying it to, can we tell the demeanor of the doctor and the ability to the bedside manner, we call it, you know, how good are you with dealing with patients and keep them calm and you know, and listening to potentially bad news. So that then evolved into a bunch of other things that we could do in terms of, you know, recording, synthesizing, training, you know, all sorts of different data that will come from that sort of agent monitoring the calls. But that was never implemented. And again, we didn't call it agents, right? But it was that sort of, for the hallucinations front, the thought was, can we actually have, I imagine this person with the glasses in a library looking at books really quickly, right? So when you say something, we're very furiously looking for, where does he say that?
That's
is that
concept,
true?
Yeah.
Is this many millimeters of whatever you had to inject on somebody? Is that the right number? That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be a fascinating use of agents in the background, I guess, fact checking you as a doctor.
Yeah.
Or in any circumstance, right? So you can have scrolling information on the side of the screen by the agent telling you, oh, you just bespoke, it should be this, not that, and then you can correct yourself without really being obvious because it's just text that's appearing next to the video.
So it's not a new concept, right? It's just trying to find a pattern and make it a name, and then we're saying that this is the framework with agents, which was already there.
Exactly.
In the Oxford Immune, then you were actually building a system which is helping to make the right decision. So it's supporting the decision for a doctor. And in one of the presentations, you're mentioning specifically name of responsible AI, which again, it's putting a name on something. But can you elaborate on that? If this is some group or some actually specific area that you're calling that, or a specific direction, or is it just the name we have used for this implementation?
I mean, so in Doctorling, I wrote a paper when I was at Doctorling called machine-assisted learning, right? And the way that Doctorling used to do its algorithms would be that a clinician will tell you what a clinician will do in a conversation to actually find out whether you have condition A or condition B. We would make that into an algorithm, and then we would run that through the system, and then we would analyze its success rate. And what I was saying before about what questions actually are irrelevant, that you don't need to ask a question because the outcome doesn't depend on the answer, that sort of stuff. And we will go around the loop. The machine will do all that inferencing. It will then propose and identify things that you don't need to do this, but maybe you're thinking about doing that sort of thing. Then the clinician would see that data, modify their algorithm, and so the loop will go around. And so you end up with something that's a model that's trained by someone who effectively is, in a way, replacing them, right? So it's basically putting their brains into this system, this expert system, you know. And there used to be expert systems before AI.
Yeah.
Then we started using.
I remember it's like 40 years ago.
Things.
Yeah, the papers
exactly.
on this one.
So I mean, if you think about AI, started in the 60s, we just didn't call it that, but And that was the idea, to have that sort of, not just in the final outcome, but in the training. So basically, which we've seen in OpenAI and others doing that, the reinforcement learning led by humans, effectively. And that's how we've seen models get better and better, because you start taking away the odds that, reduce some of the hallucinations and things, because that's not right because of X, and then the system's trained. We did that sort of thing for the clinical algorithms, effectively had a human in the loop. And I called machine-assisted learning, because it was assisted by machines, or the machine was assisted by humans. You could use it either way, I guess.
That covers this, and I can go into the expert system. That actually something that I remember my father was actually explaining me when there was not yet a name for IET. It was just cybernetics and cybernetics and this.
Fascinating.
Just finalizing on the Oxford Immune, I expect that the same is with the Doctor Link. If you have enough fascinating vision and you are pursuing solution which is purely technical and on the edge of what we know right now, there is always a pressure between deliver on the business and trying to automate, or trying to actually think about the good, stable solution from a technical perspective. How do you approach that kind of challenges, to have a pressure from both sides and make a decision? Should we move faster? Should we think about the business results or technical excellence then?
I think, it obviously depends on, I was going to say depends on budget, right? But it's an organizational design problem,
mm-hmm.
in my opinion, right? So you architect your organization in a way that allows you to do both safely, right? So you always, as I was saying before, CTOs should be always favoring the business and making sure the business is there to sustain the team and to grow and to, to benefit the customer. And so you organize yourselves in a way that you have the group that delivers, the group that builds the product. So that's like product engineering, and you're delivering something that it could be a platform, it could be a tool, it could be an app, whatever it is. But that has to be fed with the future thinkers, right? What comes next, what should we be thinking about? And so generally what I've always done, and I obviously favor that because I'm more of a big ideas guy, and I can implement, but I know that people can implement much better than me. And so to have a strong VP of engineering who's excellent at delivery, and he runs teams, puts the processes in place, and I know what good looks like, so I can work with them to get their organization set up, whilst also having a much smaller organization. I used to call it OCTO, the Office of the CTO, but I thought that was a bit weird. We used to have an octopus on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And basically that's where you have a couple of trusted people that are also visionaries, that also understand the industry they want to know. And this applies to every industry, not just health tech, right? So in fact, I did that in energy before, having an OCTO that basically said, right, this is what energy looks like now, but this is where I think we're going, and this is what we need to encourage the government to go, by doing smart grids, for example, and putting IoT in the network and ensuring that the old national grid can support electric vehicles, for example. So that sort of thinking, and then prototyping, and then writing, and then showing and sharing is important. Especially if you want to be seen as a thought leader, someone who actually sets direction, as opposed to someone who just follows the industry. And I like to be in that sort of the thought leader. I never actually post and do things like that. I tend to do my thought leadership with people, and I talk to them about what I think the future is.
Yeah, you've made my job really hard to actually find out the articles on you, and there was just few, and it's hard to get them. But
many of those is because I'm not allowed, and many of those is because I make money of them, so I can't put them freely available, unfortunately. But and that's the thing. So if you are in the big ideas sort of space, and you understand the industry you're tackling, and you know that the regulations are stopping you from doing something, that doesn't mean that you have to stop thinking the way you're thinking. All you have to do is, when we get to this point, the regulations will relax, and I want to be there already, so that when the regulation relax, like we've done with AI in health tech, right? So when they start relaxing, we're already ready for them. We're not like, oh, we better start moving now in that direction. I want to be the one setting the direction, not following it.
Okay. Makes sense. That's actually a great segue here for mentioning that I was trying to calculate how many startups or companies have you helped, and that's remarkable, because that's close to 25 companies in your history, at least the ones that I have been able to find it. And
they're not in LinkedIn, all of them. I'm not allowed either.
Exactly. That was my assumption, that I'm just calculating the one which are visible. There will be more, but you can call yourself as we have mentioned, right, as a seasoned fractional CTO. You are jumping into the company, and doing this kind of like sales approach that you're helping and turning the company around, or at least that's what I see. I would be really interested into understand what is your process or the framework when you think about jumping from day one, like a day 30, day 60, and day 90 horizon, when you start the collaboration with a new company.
That's a good question. So generally, I mean, I tend to do a lot of due diligence for like private equity and venture capital. You know, we're thinking of investing in this company. What do you think? And I developed a method would basically be talking to the key people, techies, founders, you know, process people, that sort of stuff, and then get a view very quickly as to the three P's I call it, right? The people, the product, and the process. Generally, I mean, it's very rare that you're going to find a company all those three are brilliant. In fact, I don't think any company, not even the big ones, have the perfect PPP, right? And they'll all have their own, and every process is different, and the process applies to that company. So nobody should follow the process in that book, because that book is not written for you. It's written in general. So I always look at those three, and then I understand quickly where are the challenges, where are things that actually I know from other industries that if we do this way, is going to make your life so much easier. And I was saying, you know, if you've never been outside your industry, you don't even know that that's a possibility. And someone comes along from somewhere else and they go, well, actually, if you just change this around, and they go, oh my gosh, this is so easy. So I have to do a due diligence effectively for my own benefit to understand where they are. And then I can say, I know exactly what the challenges are and I can help you. And this is how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's whether they trust me to do it or not. And obviously it tends to be the case that they do. And that's why I've been involved in so many of them.
Okay.
Some of them have been rescues, as you say, you know, that turning them around because they were in trouble. Some of them literally just to make them more efficient or to build better product quicker. But whatever it is, it always starts with that understanding what I'm dealing with effectively. Who are the people? Who are the processes? What are the processes? And then the 30, 60, 90 is more about, based on what I see, I have to put certain things in place. I need to deep dive into this, and that's going to be my first couple of weeks. It could be the product. It could be actually the people don't have the right skills for what you're trying to achieve as a business, whatever it is. And then basically based on that, then the next 30 days and the next 30 days.
Right.
Right. So there's no one template. It depends on what you find.
Yeah, one would not assume there is a template, because if there would be, it would be a situation we just need to follow. This is the
exactly, and everybody would be perfect, right? And
correct. We assume that by building the perfect processes and Scrum and the others.
Spend a long time doing them.
Correct, and just assume that the implementation is wrong. That's why you are failing, but it's not the case. As I assume that the great pattern here is that you do due diligence, you use the 3P framework, and then. Good thing that you've mentioned, and I want to like to underline that, is that you are using your experience, which is the great value, the experience from this and other industries to have a perspective and to see what is working, what is not, or what could work otherwise. I expect that you do the analysis and you have the list of the areas which could be improved or fixed. How you then prioritize that, and based on what kind of factors? Is it your knowledge, or is there anything specific that you do to know what is the first issue to be addressed and what is the second?
I mean, it's a combination of experience and what the founders or what the management of the company want to achieve. Because sometimes they'll come to me and say, we've had this team for 18 months and the product hasn't gone out yet. We haven't seen anything working, for example. That's a typical case. No? And then you understand that to them, the urgency is to actually hit the market and start generating revenue, so that you prioritize certain things to make that happen. But if the priority is, we already have market share, but we want to make it bigger, then you may have to make a different decision as to, okay, then we need to focus on X. And so it's a combination of experience in terms of, I know what levers I can pull to change things. And then you tell me what the most important thing to you is as a business. And then I can tell you which lever is the most important one to pull first. Sometimes it's like the cheapest one to pull or the quickest one to pull because they want to see a change. And so, okay, well, this will take you closer to the direction you want to go. It might not solve the problem, but it's going to take one of the biggest problems away. And it's the quickest one to do. Let's do that one first. So I have that conversation, and then obviously it's entirely up to the client to then, decide what to do next.
Maybe this is a tricky question, or not a tricky one, but without the answer yet. As we have mentioned, there is no one answer for the success itself. But have you seen any kind of situations where it's even counterintuitive threat that the company had that predicted that they are making a success or not, that others haven't actually seen it based on the examples and based on the history that you have?
Counterintuitive.
Yeah, something that it's not obvious. We assume that you enter the company and it's doing great and just need a boost, right? And we always mention that it's just started, then scale it up, then go IPO, and then you're a unicorn, right? But is there anything that you have spotted that there was some company that with all the means that are visible will not succeed, but you have turned it around, or it actually had something that made them different?
In the negative side, so the ones that look like they had all the ingredients and they didn't quite, move forward. I've only seen that a couple of times, and it's always had to do with the culture. Interestingly, and it's because there's two things that can happen with. Generally, they say, when particularly as a startup, the founders set the culture, set the tone as to this is who we are, this is what we want to do, and this is if you want to join the party, you have to, align with our mission or our vision. But sometimes there's these little, I call them mannerisms. These little things they do, they become part of the culture, almost more important than their vision. And so what you end up with is a company that has really smart people with all the money that they need and the skills that they need, and yet they go nowhere. And it tends to be they have a dysfunctional culture and they don't realize because it's their culture, it's what they've grown up in, it's the how they develop. But it makes people difficult to become autonomous, or makes them difficult to express or dissent opinions and stuff like that. And there you go. You have all the right ingredients, you just haven't mixed them the right way. So that's something that sometimes. So when an investor sends me to look at, to do a DD for a company, if you just look at the paper before you talk to anybody, you say, wow, they have really smart people, they have a really good idea, they have all the money. Should we invest in them? And then you talk to them and you pick up those things and you go, I've worked with people like this before and it never works. And say never is a strong word, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It rarely works. And when it rarely works, if you're an investor, you're going to give them a few million. You go, if you're already telling me it rarely works, that's probably a big
red flag then, yeah.
Putting that money in there, right? Sometimes you have brilliant founders, but they have no idea how to run a team or no idea how to. And then it's a decision by the investors to say, do we bring in external help to run the teams? And the founders become the idea people. Or do we not invest? Depends on whether they have the time and resources to do that.
Have you seen any kind of companies that had this kind of like issue with the culture, and is it even fixable? Because I understand your point, and this is something that we always also mention, that culture is the thing that we tend to not talk about and to prioritize it as the last thing. But is it even fixable, that you have seen any kind of examples?
I've been in dysfunctional teams as a full-time as well as a fractional, that we try to fix. And there was sometimes there's like, it's a combination of culture and personalities, right?
Yeah.
And when there's humans involved, it's always going to be tricky to change, as I was saying before, right? So if it's a culture, it's very difficult to change it, especially if you're already grown into like 10, 15, 20 people. Unless you swap everybody, the culture is embedded into the people. And when new people join, either they like it or they hate it, and then they either quit within 3 weeks or 3 months, or they become part of the problem, right? So it's very difficult to change a culture that's that embedded. If it's a dysfunctional team within an organization, that may very well be because of the team leader, the lead of that team, or the way that they consider themselves compared to the business. And if you come as an outsider, which is what I love doing, right? So I come to help. I'm not here. I don't have an agenda. My agenda is to help you. If you said you have a problem, I'll come here to help you, right? And so I have unbiased eyes, and then I'll see very weird dynamics and say, well, actually, you guys are really good, but this group has a very strange dynamic. They just they're not part of the team. They're almost like an oddball sort of thing. And then you deal with that situation in one of a couple of ways, I guess. But and that tends to work because then you have a very surgical problem to solve. But big culture problems are difficult to transform because if they're embedded in the people already.
Yeah, I didn't want to extend on that. I guess that this is the part of 3P, and always there are issues that you can solve and which are not solvable, but it's not a question if it's solvable, but if it's worth of actually solving, or from your perspective, if you do DD, if it's worth of actually approaching. But there is one elephant in the room, and that's the situation that you probably were already inside of that when you are asked to join the team, but there is already another person which is doing a CTO job or a technical leadership. How you approach that, and what are your patterns here?
It, I've been in both situations. The one where there's an outgoing one because it's not working and they need me to come and help. And then the other one where actually they have a really talented senior leader. Maybe he's been given the 3 letters title too early. They weren't ready. And so the board or the management team are a bit nervous about them. And actually, I speak to them and said, this is it's a great technologist. It's just lacking the strategic thinking, or it's just lacking thinking more business first, that sort of thing. But that's coachable, that's mentoring, that's experience, right? And that's where I come in and become more of a mentor to them. And I said, I much rather help a company that has no CTO and a very good VP of engineering, and I help them grow. And in the meantime, I fill that gap of the strategy part, than coming to a company that has everybody there and it's literally, this CTO is not working, can you replace them? Because there's something else wrong there. It's not just the one person. That's I mean, don't get me wrong, I have come across some people who shouldn't be CTOs and they cause problems, but in the main, that's not the issue, right? So I much rather help someone at one level to become the next level than having to replace someone else. Having said that, there are cases where if you're coming, I'm a technologist at heart, right? So I'm techie first. I love talking to techies, and in fact, when I have my sessions with due diligence, they always come out saying it was like a therapy session, because I understand them, I know the problems, I know their pains, I've been there before, and I sympathize, and and they see it as I can talk to this guy and tell him my challenges in this business. And the advantage of that is that even when you talk to the CTO, who may or may not feel threatened, this external guy is coming to do what, right? Take my job. And I talk to them, and then they very easily or very quickly ease themselves into, okay, this guy's here to help. He's done things before. He may see gaps that I don't see because I've never done them before, and it's just going to fill those gaps for me and help me, so I do a better job as CTO, right? So that's my approach. I never come in trying to say these guys should go, because that's not. If you have that, you have bigger problems. It's more about what gaps or what things can I help you with, that my experience of many companies hopefully can help you with, and save you the time it takes to learn those. I'm a shortcut, I guess you could call me.
Yeah, and when a CEO or a company should recognize that they need a fractional CTO and call you for help, because we are talking about how you approach that, and that makes sense. But what is the starting point other than the investors asking for due diligence?
So there's generally two times, and one is when you have a startup, which like I call a day zero startup, right? When you're starting and you're a non-technical founder, and you're going to pick a techie, and that techie is going to become unfortunately, they name the CTO, and he's maybe just fresh out of uni, it's the first techie they meet, right? Those don't tend to work well, because they'll make certain decisions which are not strategic for the business. They're just decisions that they make because they know what they do as a techie, but they don't think business first. At that point, and I try to meet some people in networking events and stuff to say, if you're in that situation, get someone like me, not me, but just get someone like me with experience to at least kick the tires of the idea, to make sure that techie that you brought in is thinking business first. If not, I'll remind them to think business first and steer them the right way. That means that from day zero, you're going to be heading in the right direction broadly and not waste a lot of runway. Many I meet the year after, when they've already wasted a year runway, and they go, we've gone nowhere. This team is not delivering, or this product is not selling. And then I said, well, I wish you met me a year ago, because we would have had a different conversation. So that's one way to do it. The other one, obviously, the investor saying there's something odd with this company, with the technology leadership. Can we bring someone to have a look and tell us what is it that's going wrong? And the other one is basically just the CEO, the founders themselves realize that they are starting to make big decisions, and the only people they can ask is the CTO or the technical leader, who may or may not be doing a good job for them. And they don't want to rely on just that opinion, so they just bring an external person to. But I think that the most typical is that when you have a startup that has little money, but you need the expertise, the wisdom of someone senior, but you can't afford a full-time CTO, just bring us 1 day a week or something. That will, for a lot less money, will give you all the impact and all the intelligence you need to do the right decisions. So I think that's the more typical case, I would say.
Right, and this is then assumed that it is the it's not a full time, because it's actually one day or 2 days a week, a month.
Yeah.
But that's for limited time, right? You don't assume that it will be forever. How you decide that you no longer are needed, or how the CEO is actually assuming that, okay, we don't need you.
I fire myself many times, right?
Yeah.
Because say, okay, we've achieved the big impact. I want to have an impact, right? That's why I stopped being a full-time CTO, because I will have the big impact in the first few months, and then I was just riding the wave. The team was autonomous, everything was great. I could tweak things here or there, but they were paying me a big salary to do very little, and I don't like that. So I want to come in, have an impact, and then you're on your way. You have the people. So that's why mentoring their VP of engineering, making sure they have the right people already in place with the right ideas, and the product is in a good place. I can say, my job here is done. I keep in touch with them. They call me every so often if they need strategic advice, talking to the board, but that's like ad hoc. So that all my clients in my portfolio have become what I call the long tail, right? So they'll reach out every so often and say, oh, we have this meeting. Can you help us with prepare this thing, or explain what this means to us, or that sort of stuff. But I say I've done what I had to do. We obviously have a contract for a number of months anyway, which tends to extend because they want me around for a bit longer. But then at some point I say, look, you just pay now for very little because the team is doing a great job. And at that point, and I need the context change. I need to get new
Correct.
fresh projects to deal with, because I love that sort of learning new stuff and helping straight away.
That's your value, right? That you are bringing the other experience. To have that, you need to jump and you need to have the experience of that. So it's
Exactly.
basically that. I've captured your statement. I believe it's from LinkedIn, and which describes this service of fractional CTO the best, that you're using the whole of my brain part of the time. I see it perfectly fit as the unique value proposition that one can get. But then, if I'm summarizing this kind of your history of helping different companies and getting this experience, you see the patterns. It's almost like the same thing with the healthcare story, that you're building first the nationwide data platform, then you're thinking about even almost a global wide information to see the pattern. You do the same with seeing different companies and helping them. So you see the patterns of who is failing, what is working, what is not. If you would be able to identify the thing that you see will disappear from the practices or the approach, the thing that will disappear in 5-10 years, or people will be laughing that we are actually doing that in this way, in either the approach or the practices, or maybe in the AI context. Do you have anything like that you would put in the time capsule to see in 5-10 years?
I think in the AI concept, it's actually quite funny. Remember last year, prompt engineering was a big thing.
Yeah.
Right. There was people getting paid a lot of money. I have a feeling we're going to be laughing about that next year. But a time capsule that's going to last very little, because by next year, I think prompting is going to be, not needed anymore. The context awareness of the AI will be such that you don't even need to prompt it anymore. It'll know what you want to do next, right? So it'll see you do something and it will continue with you. The agents will go do their thing. So I think we'll find it quite funny that we were so focused, and that someone last year got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a prompt engineering job, which is probably the most ephemeral, quick job ever. That even models nowadays, the prompts can be very loose. You don't have to be so detailed, sort of thing. So you can see how quickly in a year that's happened. So imagine what that would look like in next year. So I think that will be a funny one to put in the time capsule for AI.
Definitely. So for anybody who has still that on to-do list, then maybe you should reconsider and not jump into that and just wait, right?
Yeah. I don't think you had a job for long.
Perfect. The other fast question on this one, based on your experience with other CEOs, what would you recommend either or what you do recommend either in the form of book, course, or any kind of data to be learned that you would be able to recommend to anybody that you talk about?
Yeah, I've been asked that question before, and you know what? I think books are snapshots in time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I recommend the book, I only recommend fiction books because, the fiction, right? Books and like building habits and business, this and that, and agile, whatever, they're literally snapshots in time. And if I read one 5 years ago, I recommend it to you now, you go, why are you recommending this? This is not applicable anymore. I am a firm believer in I mean, I consume huge amounts of data in my head, right? So I literally wake up, the first thing I do is start scrolling through articles, reading articles, academic and non-academic, so AI, all sorts of things. And our field is moving so fast that, if you want to be a particular technology leader that's not left behind, you can't base your training on books, I think. And I love books. Again, historical non-fiction,
Right.
that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
fiction, that sort of stuff. But if it's for learning, I think now we've gone beyond the book, right? So we get into the point where you have custom made education, right? Like say Notebook LM, you feed it a bunch of stuff, say, right, talk to me and tell me what I want to learn about this subject, sort of thing. And I think we're going to get to that point. And my wife is always been telling me, you should build an AI company that solves education, because we're still teaching kids
Yeah. In
useless
the old
stuff that
way.
don't help them
Yes.
for life. And it's the same, memorize these facts, memorize these quotes. It's like, why don't you custom make an AI for one child who has autism or has something else, and they don't like this, but they like that, and they learn this way and not that? That's what I think we're heading to. And so books are almost like they're pretty in the shelf. I have a bunch there that haven't opened for a long time, but it's more about dynamic education and how do you actually get that. And I would recommend for anybody who wants to be a technology leader, you have to be up to date. And that means books they're nice to have, but they're not the place you should be looking at and how to do this stuff.
I almost wanted to grab my wallet and put money on the new startup with you on actually doing education. I have 3 kids and I see that pattern still. Alfonso, it says almost the thing that I cannot stop. I would like to ask so much more questions on your history. We haven't even touched sending satellites into the moon, helping in a Formula One, or saving the animals. Hopefully, we'll get back to the second version of that kind of this episode. Hopefully, we'll have much more discussions. But for now, I would like to thank you for being on the show. And by closing that, if you have any statement, or if anybody would like to get like a top 1 line from our discussion, if you have anything that you want to put it out there, what would that be?
I think I think we all know that if you're building a business nowadays, it has to be a technology business, even if it isn't. That's now become, it's an AI business, right? So I think we're going to see huge amounts of like solopreneur, single person companies being created because of AI. So make sure that you're considering what your competitors are doing. If you're a business and you're doing something, don't get left behind. Just think what comes next and jump on that. And if you don't or can't think about that, just talk to someone like me and we'll help you make sure that you're not left behind. So AI is coming together, and we either join forces with it or we're gonna lose it.
Perfect. That's I couldn't expect better summary of discussion and one-liner. Alfonso, it was the great pleasure to have you on the podcast. And as mentioned, hopefully to continue this discussion in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Cheers.
And that's all in today's episode. Thank you for listening. As always, if you have any idea for a guest or want to send us feedback, feel free to do that. And as always, you can find us on every streaming platform. So feel free to subscribe and wait for the next episode. Thank you very much. Stay tuned in.